All right, let's dive into one of the greatest, most baffling maritime mysteries the Pacific has ever seen. It's a story that sounds like it was ripped from the pages of some spooky sea legend, but believe me, it's very, very real. We're talking about the incredible, chilling case of the ghost ship, the MV Joyita.
And you know, this quote, it just gets right to the very heart of the puzzle, doesn't it? When you're out there in the middle of that vast, empty ocean, your ship isn't just a boat. It's your lifeline. It's everything. You don't abandon it unless you have absolutely no other choice. And yet, in the case of the Joyita, that seems to be exactly what happened.
25. That's the number that hangs over this entire story. It's the human cost. 25 souls, 16 crew members and 9 passengers who boarded the Joyita for what should have been a totally routine trip, and were just never seen or heard from again.
So picture this. It's November 10th, 1955. A merchant ship is sailing along when they spot something strange. It's the Joyita, listing badly in the water, partly underwater and just silent. Eerily silent. She was found a whole 5 weeks after she was supposed to arrive, having drifted more than 600 miles off her intended course. The long search was finally over, but the real mystery? Well, that was just getting started.
Okay, so to really get a handle on what might have gone so wrong, we have to start at the beginning. We need to look at what this trip was supposed to be. So let's rewind to the start of the Joyita's final fateful voyage.
Now this was meant to be a super short trip, you know? Just 48 hours from Samoa to the Tokelau Islands. A simple little run. But that 2-day voyage somehow turned into a 5-week enigma. A massive air and sea search was launched, covering something like 100,000 square miles of ocean, and they found absolutely nothing. Not a single trace.
And let's be clear, this wasn't some empty cargo ship. There were people on board, with important places to be. We had a government official, Roger Peerless, and a surgeon, Dr. Andy Parsons, who was actually on his way to perform an amputation. And there were kids too. 2 children were on that ship. The cargo itself seemed pretty ordinary. Medical supplies, food, and, well, here's a key detail, 80 empty oil drums. Now hang on to that fact, because those drums are a huge piece of this puzzle.
So here's something that's absolutely crucial. The Joyita was in trouble before it even left the dock. One of its 2 engines had a failed clutch, but the captain, a man nicknamed Dusty Miller, he made the call to go anyway, to just chance it on one engine. The ship was compromised from the very beginning.
Right, so fast forward a few weeks. When the investigators finally got on board that drifting, abandoned ship, the mystery just got deeper and deeper. The scene they found was it was filled with all these bizarre, contradictory clues.
And this is really the central conflict of the whole mystery. I mean, look at this. On one side, everything you would need to survive is gone. All 25 people, all the life rafts, the ship's logbook, even the navigation gear. But then you look at what was left behind, and it tells a totally different, much stranger story. A doctor's bag left out on the deck with bloody bandages inside. Clocks all stopped at exactly 10:25 p.m. And a radio that was basically useless. Which brings us to the question, the one that has stumped experts for decades now. Why on earth would 25 people choose to abandon a big, floating ship for tiny, flimsy life rafts out in the middle of the vast and incredibly dangerous Pacific Ocean? It makes no sense. And here's why that decision is so completely mind-boggling. The Joyita was, for all intents and purposes, unsinkable. Seriously. Her hull was lined with a ton of cork for refrigeration. And remember those 80 empty oil drums in the cargo hold? Well, that combination gave the ship so much natural buoyancy that even when it was heavily flooded, it just wasn't going to sink. And that, right there, is the maddening paradox at the heart of this story.
Now, the official inquiry did figure out some things. They found that a corroded iron pipe in the engine room had broken, and that's what was causing all the flooding. To make a bad situation way worse, the bilge pumps meant to clear the water were all clogged up. And the radio's antenna wire had a hidden break that was painted over, which meant their distress calls wouldn't travel more than a couple of miles. So yeah, they were taking on water and they were completely alone.
Investigators also found the ship's lights switched on. That detail, plus the fact that the electric clock stopped at 10:25, paints this really vivid picture of a major crisis hitting them in the dead of night. Just imagine the confusion and terror of that situation.
So, we've got a flooded, powerless ship in the middle of the night in the middle of the ocean. That explains why they were in distress, for sure. But it doesn't explain why they disappeared. And this is where the theories come in.
Okay, so the simplest explanation is probably just
Panic. You've got water rising in the darkness, your radio doesn't work, your one good engine is failing. It's easy to see how sheer terror could take over. Maybe the passengers and crew, who weren't all seasoned sailors, thought the ship was about to go down any second, and forced everyone to abandon it, having no idea that the Joyita was actually designed to stay afloat.
Then there's the more dramatic theory, a mutiny. It was apparently well known that Captain Miller and his American first mate Chuck Simpson did not get along at all. So it's possible that as everything started to go wrong, a violent struggle for control broke out. That could explain the injuries and those bloody bandages, and a chaotic, terrible decision to leave the ship.
And of course, you have the more sinister theories, which were really popular at the time. Some newspapers were pushing stories that the Joyita stumbled upon a Japanese fishing fleet doing something illegal, or maybe even a Soviet submarine during the Cold War, and was attacked to get rid of any witnesses. Now, these ideas were really fueled by the paranoia of the era, but honestly, no real evidence ever turned up to support them.
So, with all these theories flying around, what did the officials actually decide? What was the final word on what happened? Let's take a look at the aftermath. Well, the official inquiry answered the how of the ship's problems, but not the why of the disappearances. They concluded the Joyita was basically unseaworthy, and they put the blame squarely on Captain Miller for taking such a risk. But when it came to the most important question, what happened to the 25 people, their official word was inexplicable. As you can imagine, a lot of people found that answer deeply unsatisfying. Critics at the time were pretty vocal, claiming the whole inquiry was just a cover-up, a convenient way to blame a dead man who couldn't defend himself, and of course to protect the government from being held responsible and from having to pay out costly lawsuits to the victims' families.
The ship itself almost seemed cursed after that. It was sold, it was fixed up, but then it ran aground twice more in the next few years. Can you believe that? Eventually, the poor Joyita was just left on a beach in Fiji, and over the next decade, the ocean slowly tore it apart, piece by piece, until nothing was left. The ghost ship just vanished back into the sea.
You know, at the end of all the theories and the reports and the speculation, we're just left with this profound human tragedy. This quote from the cousin of one of the passengers really brings it all home. Behind the whole mystery, there are real families who have had to live with this awful uncertainty for decades.
So, what do you think? What's the most likely story here? Was it a terrified group of people who panicked and fled into the unforgiving ocean, a violent mutiny that went horribly wrong, or something far more sinister, an attack by unknown forces? The Joyita is still keeping its secrets, leaving us with one of the most haunting and enduring mysteries of the sea.